You know, when something's wrong with our plants, our first thought is always, what's missing, right? More nitrogen, maybe more compost, more water. But what if the real problem isn't what's missing at all? What if it's what's hiding in plain sight? Something that's silently killing our plants from the ground up. That's what we're digging into today, the silent killers in your soil.
Yeah, take a look at this. It looks totally lifeless. Your first guess? Probably needs more water, right? Or maybe some fertilizer. But the real story here is way more interesting. This isn't about what's missing. The culprits here could actually be things that are essential for life, but they're here in toxic amounts.
And that's the big question we're tackling. What if the problem isn't what's missing, but what's there in excess? We're going to uncover how too much of a good thing can turn beautiful, fertile ground into a total wasteland. And all the clues, they're right there in the soil's chemistry.
All right, let's get into it. Time to open the case file. We've got two main suspects we need to look at, and they might surprise you: iron and salt. Now, I know what you're thinking. Plants need those, right? And you're correct. They are absolutely fundamental, but they both have a dark side when things get out of balance.
And this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's this crazy double-edged sword. You've got iron, which is like the engine for photosynthesis, super crucial. And you've got salts that help plants manage their water. All good stuff, but cross a certain line, and that same iron becomes a poison from the inside out. And those helpful salts, they start stealing water away from the plant and literally rip the soil structure to shreds. Okay, so we've got our suspects. Now it's time to dig into the forensics. How exactly do they pull this off? Their methods are pretty different, but trust me, they're both just as destructive. Let's start with case file number 1, iron overload. This usually happens in soils that are really waterlogged or acidic. What happens is the plant just sucks up way too much iron, and this triggers something called oxidative stress. And the scary part? This isn't an attack from the outside. The damage is happening from inside the plant's own cells.
Okay, so this is where it gets really gnarly. That extra iron kicks off a chemical reaction that creates these really toxic molecules called reactive oxygen species, or ROS for short. The best way to think about ROS, they're like internal rust, just total molecular vandals that go around wrecking everything they touch. They tear up the cell walls, they destroy the proteins that do all the important jobs, and they even mess with the plant's DNA. And what you see on the outside, the stunted growth, the weird bronzing on the leaves, that's the result of this internal chaos. Eventually, the cells just die.
All right, on to case file number 2, the salt scourge. Now, salt is a whole different beast because it's got this nasty two-pronged attack. It goes after the plant directly, and it goes after the soil that the plant needs to live. It's a double whammy.
So let's break that down. First up is what's called osmotic stress. Basically, there's so much salt in the soil that it actually pulls water out of the plant's roots. Think about that for a second. The plant can be sitting in soaking wet soil, but it can't drink a drop. It's literally dying of thirst while swimming in water. And then there's the second attack, and this one is huge. The structural damage. Too much sodium, and the soil itself just disintegrates.
Now, to really get why that's so bad, we got to understand what good soil structure even is. And it all comes down to one word: flocculation. It's a fancy word, but it just means that all the little tiny soil particles, like clays, clump together. And these clumps create this amazing spongy structure full of little tunnels for water and air and roots. This is good. Flocculation is basically the holy grail of healthy soil.
And the evil twin of flocculation is dispersion. This is when those awesome clumps just fall apart into tiny individual particles. And what happens then? They clog up all those channels, creating something like concrete. It's a dense, hard barrier. Think of it like a massive traffic jam for water and roots. You know, if you've ever watered your garden and the water just sits on top forever, yeah, that's dispersion. And it is very, very bad. And this picture just shows it perfectly, right? On the left, you've got that nice flocculated soil. Water flows right through. Easy peasy. On the right, that's dispersed soil. Water just pools up on top, can't go anywhere. And now let's meet the players. Our heroes are calcium and magnesium. They're great at holding those soil particles together like a strong glue. Our villain, sodium. It's just not strong enough, and it lets the whole structure fall apart. Okay, so we know how our suspects do their dirty work, but how do we actually catch them in the act? How do we diagnose these invisible problems before it's too late? Well, this is where we have to stop guessing and start looking at some real data.
The only way to know for sure is to test your soil and your water. I mean, sure, wilting leaves or stunted growth could be a million different things, but a test, that gives you cold, hard evidence. It tells you exactly what's going on chemically in your soil.
And for salt problems, one of the most important numbers you're going to see on that test is the sodium absorption ratio, or SAR. The easiest way to think of it is like a ratio of the bad guy, sodium, to the good guys, calcium and magnesium. It tells you who's winning the fight for your soil structure.
So when you get your test results back, this is kind of what the lab is looking at. They look at two main things. First is electrical conductivity, or EC, which is just a fancy way of measuring the total amount of salt. Then they look at the SAR, which tells them how much of a threat that specific bad guy, sodium, really is. And you can see right here, as those numbers go up, the risk level goes from low to medium to
So if there's one number you need to remember from all this, it's 13. If your SAR is above 13, that's a big red flag. It means sodium is winning, your soil structure is in serious danger, and you've got a real problem on your hands.
All right, we've identified the bad guys, we know how they work, we know how to diagnose the problem. So now for the most important part, right? The action plan. How do we fix this? How do we take our soil back?
Well, the solution is actually pretty cool. It's a simple 3-step process. First, you add something with a lot of calcium, like gypsum. Second, that powerful calcium comes in and literally kicks the weaker sodium right off the soil particles. It's like a hostile takeover. And third, once that bad sodium is just floating around, you use a bunch of clean, low salt water to just flush it away, deep down past the roots.
And this little diagram shows that chemical swap perfectly. See, the calcium muscles its way in, boots the sodium out, and boom, your soil structure gets restored, and all that nasty sodium gets washed away. It's just a brilliant, elegant solution.
But hey, it's not always about big chemical fixes. Sometimes it's just about being smart. Here's a great tip from a gardener who has to use salty water. They say to water early in the morning or in the evening. Why? Because when it's cool, less water evaporates, which means you don't get that crusty layer of salt concentrating right on the leaves.
And check this out. You can even be clever about where you put your plants.
Instead of planting right on top of a furrow, you plant on the shoulder of it. As you water, the water flow naturally pushes the salts away from the plant's roots. You're basically using physics to protect your seedlings. How cool is that?
So after all this, what's the final verdict? Well, it's pretty clear that healthy soil isn't just about adding more good stuff. It's all about maintaining a really delicate balance.
Because at the end of the day, it really is a balancing act. Iron and salt aren't the bad guys here. They're essential for life. The problem is just having way too much. And that kind of leaves us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? As we try to feed a growing planet, we have to use more challenging land and water. So understanding and managing this delicate balance isn't just a tip for your backyard garden. It's absolutely critical for our global food security. And that's the real challenge. How do we get this right on a massive scale?